It's good to see all of you back tonight, and for those of you who are visiting, we are delighted that you've come. We've been talking about drawing near to God with all of our heart. Tonight we're going to be talking about the importance of drawing near to God with a surrendered heart to God. We're going to begin by looking at a text in Matthew, the 8th chapter, beginning in verse number 5. The text says, "When Jesus entered Capernaum, a centurion came forward to him, appealing to him, 'Lord, my servant is lying paralyzed at home, suffering terribly.' And he said to him, 'I will come and heal him.' But the centurion replied, 'Lord, I am not worthy to have you come under my roof, but only say the word, and my servant will be healed. For I too am a man under authority, with soldiers under me. And I say to one, Go, and he goes. And to another, Come, and he comes. And to my servant, Do this, and he does it.' When Jesus heard this, he marveled. And he said to those who followed him, 'Truly I tell you, with no one in Israel have I found such faith. I tell you, many will come from east and west and recline at table with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom, while the sons of the kingdom will be thrown into the outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth.' And to the centurion Jesus said, 'Go and let it be done for you as you have believed.' And the servant was healed at that very moment." What a remarkable statement. Jesus said of this man, "Truly I tell you, with no one in Israel have I found such faith." That's a remarkable statement. It wasn't a statement that was directed toward one of the rabbis. It wasn't a statement directed toward a priest. It wasn't a statement as Jesus was referring to one of the Pharisees, a doctor of the law, or even one of his disciples. This was a statement that Jesus made about a Gentile military officer, a Roman centurion. Very often we look at this narrative of the centurion. We talk about the example that we have here of great humility. And that is a great lesson. And we look at this and we talk about the importance of being compassionate. And that's a good lesson too. And we talk about the willingness to embrace intercession. And that's a good lesson too. But at the center of this narrative, the key point is that the centurion understood authority. He understood authority. And Jesus identified that understanding of authority as the very essence of this man's faith. Can you imagine what Jesus was saying on that occasion? He had all of his disciples there. He had the elders of the Jews there who were telling Jesus that this man was a good man. He is worthy, Luke said in his account. He's worthy to be helped. He built our city. Wonderful things they said about him. But Jesus recognized this centurion in the presence of these men and called to their attention something that they were failing to recognize. He said, "This man had a faith that I have not found anywhere, because this man understands that I possess absolute authority." And the centurion's faith was demonstrated not just by his mouth, but by his willing submission to the authority of Christ. Now, Matthew, in his account, as it opens, he presents the centurion as a man of compassion. The text says, the message he sent to Jesus was this: "Lord, my servant is lying home, paralyzed, suffering terribly." The centurion had compassion for his servant. Jesus immediately responded. He said, I will heal him. I will come and heal him. And the centurion immediately responded to Jesus in verse 8, and he said, "Lord, I am not worthy to have you come under my roof." Just say the word. All you have to do is say the word. I know my servant will be healed. And then he goes on to explain, I am a military officer. I understand authority. Orders are given and orders are obeyed. And the one with authority has the right to give orders. And this man understood that if Jesus commanded the sickness to leave, that the sickness would obey, the paralysis would obey, and it would leave. And Matthew tells us that Jesus marveled at his faith. Now, I want you to turn to the parallel account over in Luke's Gospel, in chapter 7. I want to just point out a couple of things there. This text embellishes, rounds out the narrative. Luke makes it clear that the centurion did not personally come to Jesus, but he sent his entourage who were representing him as they came to Jesus. And he sent the elders of the Jews to Jesus, asking him to come and heal the servant. And when they came to Jesus, they pleaded with him earnestly, saying, "He is worthy to have you do this for him, for he loves our nation. And he is the one who built us our synagogue." Jesus, as he approaches the house, receives another delegation from the centurion. And this time, the text says, when he was not far from the house, the centurion sent friends saying to him, "Lord, do not trouble yourself, for I am not worthy." Isn't that amazing? The elders among the Jews, they are coming to Jesus pleading with him, "Help this man, this Gentile. Help this man, this Roman. Help this man, this military officer. Help this man." And the Jewish elders said, "He is worthy to be helped." And what did the man say of himself, the centurion? He said to the Lord, "I am not worthy. I am not worthy." Amazing. Matthew, in his account, as he is wont to do, he often abbreviates the narratives that other gospel writers embellish a little bit. Luke frequently supplies additional details and different details to the narratives. In this narrative, you see the situation where this centurion is acting through emissaries, just like a king would send his emissaries, but they represent the king. The king has come. The king has proclaimed. The king says. The king is in the palace, but these men represent the king. That's what's going on here. Luke makes clear the details about this. Matthew is emphasizing in his gospel the faith of the centurion and the authority of Jesus and the inclusion of the Gentiles in the kingdom. And so he's going to remind us that Jesus said, I tell you, many will come from east and west and recline at the table with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And for the Jew, that's unthinkable. That those Gentiles would be coming from those nations, reclining at the table with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Luke is reminding us in his gospel that this centurion was a man who had an understanding about authority and that he had a humility in understanding who he was in comparison to who Jesus was. Now, I want you to note the compassion of the centurion, because in both accounts, we are impressed with the fact that the gospel writers wanted us to know this centurion cared about his servant. That's remarkable, because in New Testament times, servants were treated like property. And yet, you just hear the compassion in this man's voice. And he sent the message to Jesus. He's lying in paralysis. And he didn't stop there. He said, and he's suffering, but he didn't just stop there. He said, he's suffering terribly. He's suffering terribly. This centurion loved his servant. And this centurion loved the people of God. The Jews who are coming to Jesus pleading on his behalf, they said, look, this man, he's a Gentile. Yes, he's a Roman. Yes, he's a Roman centurion. Yes, but he loves our nation. Despite being a Gentile, despite the fact he's a military officer, despite the fact that he represents Rome, and they were the nemesis of the occupied people of Judea. And yet they said of this man, he loves our nation. He built us our synagogue. His love and his care and concern, it wasn't just theoretical. He put his money where his mouth was. He demonstrated his affection. There's something very consistent about that emphasis here. Later on, the Apostle John is going to write, and he's going to remind Christians, love not in word, and neither in deed, not just with your tongue. Love not in word or just with your tongue, just talking about things, but in deed and in truth. You demonstrate the love that you have for one another. The Jews said of this man, he loves our nation. He built our synagogue. He invested in us. And the elder said, he's worthy. The man said, I'm not worthy. Others, the Jews, they saw his merit. The man, he saw his need. And Jesus, he saw true faith. And true faith always expresses itself in the context of humility. The center of the entire narrative is this: The man said in Luke 7 and verse 8, the centurion, I too am a man under authority with soldiers under me. He was saying to Jesus, I know who you are. I understand authority. It works like this. You say to one, go, and he goes. You say to another, come, and he comes. You say to a servant, do this, and he does it. The key expression here is not merely that the centurion had authority. He did. As a Roman officer, he had authority. But the important thing is that he understood that he too was under authority. And he recognized the authority of Christ. That's where faith began. And so, we're impressed with the fact that this man understood how authority works. I say to one, go, and he goes. To another, come, and he comes. To the servant, do this, and he does it. A soldier under authority does not negotiate his commands. He obeys them. That's the point. Now, we're going to take a little diversion here for just a second. No extra charge for this, but I'm throwing it in. There's a very fundamental parenting principle here. God has given to all of us who are parents and grandparents, He's given to parents the responsibility of teaching children to obey. Obedience is fundamental to glorifying God. Obedience is taught first and foremost in the home. Teach the principle. Teach the principle. A soldier does not negotiate his commands. The principle is a serious one. Do you know in Romans chapter 1, the Apostle Paul begins describing the absolute repulsive character of a godless culture that has pushed the concept of a creator God completely out of the picture. And what do you have left when you refuse to acknowledge God? What do you have left? And Paul said, what you have left is this. God gave them up to their own reprobate minds to do the things that are not fitting. He gave them up in the lust of their hearts to impurity, to the dishonoring of their bodies. He gave them up to their dishonorable passions. And since they did not see fit to acknowledge God, I'm in Romans 1 and 28. And since they did not see fit to acknowledge God, God gave them up to a debased mind to do what ought not to be done. They were filled with all manner of unrighteousness, evil, covetousness, malice. They are full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, maliciousness. They are gossips, slanderers, haters of God, insolent, haughty, boastful, inventors of evil, disobedient to parents. Whoa, what? disobedient to parents. How in the world did disobedient to parents get into a list of impurity, ungodliness, dishonorable passions, unrighteousness, covetous, malice, murder, strife, deceit, disobedient to parents? It is because the home is God's primary training ground for learning submission and respect for authority that is going to be expressed through obedience. Do you know what the centurion said to Jesus? He said, I know how authority works. Authority functions through command. Isn't that what he said? Authority functions through command. I say to one, go, and he goes. I say to another, come, and he comes. I say to the servant, do this, and he does it. Authority functions through command. Children need to learn how authority works. When authority speaks, action and obedience must follow, not negotiations. Folks, we live in a culture that somehow has become very confused in thinking that the way that we raise our children, train our children, that the proper way to do that is to give them suggestions and open the dialogue. And I'm saying to you, Christians have a far more serious understanding of what's going on here. Regarding God, regarding His authority, when authority speaks, action, obedience follows, not negotiations. The centurion was telling Jesus, I know this. Unfortunately, the Jews did not. And the question tonight is, do we? Do we? And parents, I want to say to you, this principle is taught, first of all, in the small things of life. And you may think, when you tell a child to do something, when you have expressed to a child something that should or should not be done, you may think, oh, well, it wasn't that big a deal anyway. I can live with it either way. That's not the point. The point is not, well, the house is not going to fall down if he does. That is not the point. The house may not fall down if your child does not get up and go and do what you just told him to do without negotiating it. The house may not fall down because of that. But one day, your child may lose his soul if he has not learned obedience. And what the centurion was saying here about a surrendered heart. to authority. The centurion in his own mind was applying this principle to Jesus. He said, Lord, I understand. You don't have to come to my house. I understand how authority works. I command soldiers and they obey me. You command disease and it will obey you. The centurion got it. It was the Jews who didn't understand. And the centurion understood, in respect to this authority thing, that if the Lord issued the command for the disease to depart, the centurion understood distance is irrelevant. The authority stands. Doesn't matter how far away he is. Parents, and the centurion understood that physical presence was not necessary. All you need to do is say the words. You don't have to physically be there, because the authority stands. Parents, distance doesn't matter. Physical presence ought not to be necessary. Authority matters. The centurion saw what the Jews were missing. The Israelites, the Jews, they saw a teacher. They saw one who could work miracles. And the centurion, he saw one who possessed divine authority. And he recognized the sovereign power of Jesus Christ. He said, Lord, I get it. I know who you are, and I understand how authority works. And the text says, and Jesus marveled at his faith. What an amazing statement. Only 2 times in the Scripture do we read that Jesus ever marveled at something. On the one hand, he marveled at the unbelief of the Jews. In Mark 6 and verse 6, he marveled at their unbelief after the signs, the wonders that he was performing, and they still did not believe. Nazareth saw all kinds of evidence that Jesus is the Christ. They didn't believe. Jesus marveled at that. And the only other time the Scriptures tell us that Jesus marveled at something was in this text. Jesus marveled at the centurion's faith. I have not found so great a faith, no, not in all Israel. Amazing, isn't it? And it's the major lesson of the text: submission to authority. Faith is demonstrated when we surrender our will to Him. The culture we live in very often defines faith as optimistic thinking, positive thinking. We have emotional strength and confidence that something will take place. Biblically, faith is trusting obedience. It is submission to the authority of God. And the centurion believed because he recognized who Jesus is. Lord, I know who you are. All you have to do is say the word. Why? Because you have authority. That's why. Just say the word. He trusted in the word of Christ. Faith trusts, and faith obeys. Authority demands submission. Parents, I don't know any other way to say that. Children must be taught to submit, to surrender. I hear parents say something, well, I'll tell you, we've got the battle of the wills going on here. You may have the battle going on, but it ought to be a foregone conclusion who's going to win. In the home of a Christian, children must be taught to submit. Jesus said, all authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth. I'm saying, true faith is not just admiring Jesus. He doesn't just want our admiration. He doesn't just want a salute. He wants the surrender of our lives to Him. The centurion recognized Christ's right to rule. And he did not attempt to negotiate with Jesus. Parents, are we seeing that? Are we seeing that here? He submitted himself to Jesus. I too am a man under authority. Modern disciples, often in our world, lots of people, they want Jesus as Savior. But they bow their back to Him in allowing Him to be Lord. The centurion, he wanted both. And his example becomes a preview to the expansion of the gospel to the Gentile world. True faith begins with recognizing the authority of Christ. Authority that demands a surrendered heart. All of us, as the centurion noted, all of us are under authority. I too am a man under authority. That principle applies. Parents, elders, teachers, preachers, all Christians, we all must submit to the authority of Christ. Genuine humility is the context in which faith must be expressed. The elders of the Jews were saying to Jesus, oh, this man is something. Oh, this man is great. He's a great man. He's a wonderful person. You will love him. He is worthy to be helped. The man said, I am not worthy. It's not about me being worthy. He understood that. Every area of life, all authority, it's His. In the physical realm, in the spiritual realm. Jesus has authority over our families. We need to let Him be Lord. And we need to surrender and submit in our homes to His will. Jesus has authority over our finances. And we need to in a consumer-driven economy. In the sea of affluence in which we are drowning. We need to let Jesus have authority over our resources. Jesus has authority over our speech. He has authority over our relationships. He has authority over our worship. He has authority over all. And faith that begets a surrendered heart expresses itself in saying, Lord, speak Thy word, and I will obey. The greatness of the centurion's faith was not just that he believed that Jesus could heal his servant. The Jewish elders believed that too. Lots of people believed that. They had seen the miracles. The greatness of the centurion's faith was that he understood why Jesus could heal his servant. He could heal him because he understood that Jesus had authority. That's why. And when he saw the authority of Jesus Christ, he willingly submitted himself to it. I want to ask you something tonight. Do you merely admire Jesus? Or have you completely surrendered to His authority? That's the question. It's the question for all of us. And wherever Christ's authority is truly recognized, whenever we come to really understand the authority that He has, the submission, the surrendering of our lives, the submission of faith, inevitably is going to follow. If you're here tonight not a Christian, I'm asking you tonight, if you see the authority of Jesus, King of kings and Lord of lords, do we understand what it means? And have we bowed our knees? If you've never obeyed the gospel of Christ, if you've never, with a penitent heart, put on the Lord in baptism, you can do that tonight. And if you're a child of God, and somewhere along the way, you have set your jaw, and you've stiffened your back, and you've planted your feet, and you have refused to follow Jesus in some area of your life, I'm asking you tonight, would you surrender even that to Jesus? And would you come home to Him? While we stand and sing, we invite you to come.